This talk was given by Roshi Rafe Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
Today is Saturday, October 25th. To repeat a little of what was just said, this is our pre-Halloween morning of practice. We are looking at the suffering of hungry ghosts pre-Halloween and the great harm they cause. There are people in this world who have so much, and yet they have no contentment, no satisfaction, and because of that are driven to cause harm to themselves and so many others. Blake wrote, more is the cry of a mistaken soul, less than all cannot satisfy. Not all doesn't mean you get everything. Everything steps in. You've fallen away. It's already our own. The Buddha had only a begging bowl and a robe and was said to be the richest man in the world. Why? Why? So today we will do a repetitive repeat of a teisho I've done for a number of years, this time of year for the hungry ghosts, revised every year. It's always the point is always last year's poverty was not true poverty. Last year there was room for a gimlet, an awl to make a hole. This year I can't even find the gimlet. Last year's poverty was not true poverty. Last year's understanding was not true understanding. Last minute's understanding was not true understanding. We continue on. Endless Path was not a name chosen in vain. So, in Buddhism, hungry ghosts or pretas live miserable lives in one of the 6 realms of unenlightened existence. As you'll see up on the altar, there's the wheel of life with the human realm, the demonic realm, the warring spirits or Ashura's realm, the animal realm, the hungry ghostly realm. Did I leave anything out?
Heaven.
The devas, the heavenly realm. So that's the wheel of life in Buddhist tradition. And of course, around it is this great fanged mouth and clawed arms holding on to the great pie of life. This is medieval Christianity. This was known as Tempex Eric, something like that. Devouring time. Around the wheel of life is time devouring it away. As we wander, samsara means wandering through these 6 realms. Whether you take it psychologically, literally, mythically, it's all there. So, in Buddhism, hungry ghosts or pretas live miserable lives in one of the 6 realms of unenlightened existence. They have swollen bellies and throats thin as needles. So their hunger, no matter how much they get, how much they are fed, is never satisfied. They want huge helpings, but their throats are too small to swallow what they want. Their bodies too wasted to even properly digest it. They're always unsatisfied, starving for respect, for happiness, for anything and everything that someone else might have that they don't. They're driven to want, but never, never to truly get. While it is a condition we may all encounter at times, hungry ghosts live there interminably. We see them in our culture today. Such ghosts are not pretend things, not something to be found in books. Open the newspaper, look at the internet. It's all there, and their very ghostliness causes harm, not just to themselves, but to others, to plants, rivers, trees, air, animals, to their own houses, which they may bulldoze in fits of pique. Hungry ghosts, some of whom seem to have a leg in the demonic realm and some with a leg in the realm of the Asuras or warring spirits, can be helped by offering food and drink to them with a mind of Dharma, of vast, empty compassion. They can become more receptive to the Dharma. And so we see in the Wheel of Life, there are Buddhist teaching in every one of those realms, even in the most awful realms. Ghosts, in such a view, are not simply terrifying, They are pitiable. They suffer constantly. Everyone else's grass is always greener. Seeing this, they hurl plates of food against walls in despair and frustration. They smash buildings cherished by others in childish rages. An introductory koan says, "Save a ghost. Save a ghost." Today, we will offer food along with Dharma words and prayers to ease their self-created pain. The painful karma they have created themselves that causes them to continually cause and know only misery, never contentment, never satisfaction. Also, to go into the Zen of it, we ourselves may know that thoughts, actions, understandings, perceptions, realizations that had once seemed good enough may in time no longer be sufficient, and we outgrow them. But ghost-like, they can return and haunt us. But maybe they return not to block our way, but to give us another chance. Maybe ghosts appear to give us another chance. If so, their appearance may not be reason for disappointment, but an opportunity for us to mature further. With Halloween then on the horizon, we'll look again, as we have the last several years, at Koan number 2 in the Gatelesss Barrier, Master Pai-Chang and the fox. Seen in a Halloween light, it becomes a shape-shifting encounter. There and back again. The case goes like this. Whenever Pai-Chang gave a teisho, an old man was always there listening with the monks. When they left the hall, the Dharma hall, he would also leave. Then, one day, the old man stayed behind, and the master asked him who he was. The old man replied, "I am not a human being." Ooh, this is getting eerie. I am not a human being. In the far distant past, in the time of Kashyapa Buddha, that is world cycles ago, how many Buddhas have already been on this earth, long forgotten? How many cultures have risen and fallen away, long forgotten? How much is buried as oceans became mountains and mountains became oceans on this very planet? Long ago, in the far distant past, in the time of Kashyapa Buddha, the Buddha of our world cycle is Shakyamuni. This is a far distant past. I was the head priest on this mountain. One day a monk asked me, does an enlightened person fall under the law of cause and effect or not? That is an enlightened person bound by karma? I answered, such a person does not fall under the law of cause and effect. Because of this answer, I was reborn 500 times as a fox. Now, I beg of you, Master, please say a turning word. That is a word, a phrase, something that can free me. A turning word on my behalf and release me from the body of a fox. He then asked Pai-Chang, does an enlightened person fall under the law of cause and effect or not? Pai-Chang said, such a person does not evade the law of cause and effect. Upon hearing this, the old man immediately was deeply enlightened. Bowing, he said, I have now been released from the body of the fox. The body is on the other side of this mountain. I wish to make a request of you. Please, Abbot, perform my funeral as for a priest. The master had the Ino, timekeeper, let's see, Ino is lead chanter, okay. Had the Ino strike the hon, the wooden block. That's like we use a mokugo here before the sitting to let you know time is coming to sit. In larger monasteries, there's a block hanging that struck with a mallet. Bok, bok, bok. Strike the horn and announce to the assembly that after the midday meal there would be a funeral service for a priest. The monks talked about this among themselves, wondering how could this be since everyone was fine and there'd been no one in the Nirvana hall. The Nirvana hall is the sick hall, because from there you may slide, slip, breathe your last, enter Nirvana. After the noon meal, Pai-Chang led the monks to a rock on the far side of the mountain, and there with his staff he poked out the body of a dead fox. He then performed the cremation ceremony. That evening, Master Pai-Chang took the high seat before his assembly. In China, in the old days, where Zen began, Chan it was called, meaning from the Sanskrit root jhana, meditation, which came out of India. The teacher would sit on a high seat, not necessarily with legs crossed, maybe with legs down or legs simply across one another. But it was a high, kind of a box-like seat, elevated higher than the monks. He took the high seat before his assembly and told the monks the whole story about the fox being the ex-priest, head monk, the enlightened person, the whole thing. So Wang Po, who was Obaku in Japanese, his major, Pai-Chang, by the way, would be Yakuja in Japanese. Wang Po, his chief disciple, became a great teacher in his own right, but here he's still a student, stepped forward and asked. The old man failed to give the correct turning words and was made to live as a fox for 500 lives, you say. If, however, his answer had not been incorrect each time, what would he have become? The old man failed to give the correct answer. Made to live as a fox for 500 lives, you say. If, however, he'd answer correctly every time, what would he then have become? Pai-Chang said, just step up closer here and I'll tell you. Wang Po went up to Pai-Chang and slapped him in the face. Pai-Chang clapped his hands and laughed, saying, I thought the barbarian had a red beard, but here's a red-bearded barbarian. Wu Men's commentary. Not falling under the law of cause and effect. Why should this prompt 500 lives as a fox? Not evading the law of cause and effect. Why should this prompt a return to human life? If you have the single eye of realization, you will appreciate how the former head of the monastery enjoyed 500 lives of grace as a fox. Whew. You will appreciate how the former head of the monastery enjoyed 500 lives of grace as that fox. Woman's verse, not falling, not evading, two faces of the same die. Not evading, not falling, 1,000 mistakes, 10,000 mistakes. So, this important koan occurs early in our curriculum, being case 2 of the Woman koan, Gatelesss Barrier, Mumonkan in Japanese. So it is essentially a checking question on mu, which was Zhao Chu's response to the inquiry of case 1, does a dog have Buddha nature? They're actually mirrors in some ways of each other. In practice, this follow-up doesn't come immediately after mu. First, we take up mu's checking questions. Then the first gate of Zen, as taught by Eiken Roshi, requires that we respond to several other brief koans, after which we examine the 50 or so introductory koans. Only then do we arrive at this koan of the fox, where wily old Wu Men waits with his excellent challenge. The koan begins in an ordinary enough way. Master Pai-Chang is giving teishos. One day clock time falls away, and the deep past becomes accessible. There are such moments. While the koan might be fiction, it's not pretense. Aiken Roshi suggests that Pai-Chang may have come upon a dead fox and thought, "Ha-ha, here's a way to turn the Dharma wheel. With it we can look into karma and essential nature," and he brilliantly created this whole story. Fiction can be a route to reality. Looking through a telescope at the night sky, astronomers recommend that we do not look directly into the eyepiece, but use averted vision. Averted vision. That is, when looking into the scope, we should look from the side of the eye, not directly. In this way, we make the best use of the physiology of the eye's light-gathering abilities and will see more with greater detail than if we'd looked straight on. Fiction does the same for the mind's eye. Emily Dickinson wrote, "Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Averted vision is the secret of deeper seeing." Woman tells it slant to make it straight. An introductory koan says, "Go straight through a narrow mountain pass of 49 or sometimes 99 curves. Go straight through a narrow mountain pass of 99 or 49 curves. Pai-Chang meets an old man who is not a human being. Trick or treat. He wears a human costume, but he's really a fox or a fox spirit. In Asia, fox spirits are uncanny, supernatural emanations, tricky and misleading. So the koan begins with shape-shifting, but then removes a mask to reveal a more intimate face. Pai-Chang, it turns out, is encountering not a fox, but his own earlier self. This is how Aiken Roshi sees it. A human falls into the non-human, and the non-human is revealed not only as human, but as myself. Hard boundaries dissolve. The oddity continues. In this koan, we go so far back, we're not even in our own world cycle anymore. We're back before even Shakyamuni Buddha was the Buddha. Back in a world age when the historic Buddha was known as Kashyapa, one of the 7 past Buddhas, long before our own cycle of history on this planet even began. Back then, old Pai-Chang, the former head of this same monastery, was asked an essential question about enlightenment and cause and effect. Does enlightenment free us from the bonds of karma? Is that the point? No more bondage to cause and effect? In short, does an enlightened person fall under the law of cause and effect or not? It's a good question. If enlightenment is freedom, what kind of freedom is it? Old Pai-Chang, in that past world age, gives the classical Buddhist answer. Enlightenment brings freedom from the endless bondage of cause and effect. Isn't this a very good reason to practice? Who wouldn't want that? In fact, according to tradition, this is often why people might practice, in the hope of becoming free of all that binds, getting beyond the often deeply, painfully consequential effects of our own past unskillful thoughts and actions. Maybe this is what drew us to a zendo and to a sitting mat. Caliban, the fascinating witch-born monster of Shakespeare's late play, The Tempest, chants, "Heyday, freedom, freedom, heyday, Caliban, get a new master, be a new man." What the monster hopes is that with freedom, anything goes. He'll be free to do and get whatever he wants. Many people seem to feel that this is all that freedom means, and so they misconstrue real freedom. What is the great freedom that Zen offers? Something is amiss with old Pai-Chang's traditional Buddhist answer that the enlightened person is free from cause and effect. For with it, he's turned into a fox, not just once, but 500 times. Now, this same Pai-Chang stands before his present self and asks, would you please offer a more correct response and free me? Free me from the fox body created by cause and effect of my old and incomplete answer, created by the cause and effect stemming from my old, incomplete answer. He has returned to clear up an old era of insight and understanding and put that old ghost to rest. We've all been there. How often might we yearn for a do-over in life? Old views do get outgrown, and when they do, we find they simply no longer suffice. We wish we could have been who we are now in some past time and not made some kind of foolish mistake or said some kind of foolish thing. We change as our view, as our understanding, as our need to understand changes. A point not in the koan, but worth considering, is that there are consequences, not just to thoughts and deeds, but to our very understanding, which we end up living out as our lives. For example, if we believe that we're ultimately, irrevocably separate and alone, isolated from wind, rain, bugs, trees, animals, and people, then that is the reality we live, the karma we create for ourselves. Living within such a sense of isolation creates effects such as anxiety, aggression, competitiveness, greed, and hatred. If, on the other hand, we believe that the Buddha was not a fool or a liar, when upon his great enlightenment he spontaneously exclaimed, "Wonder of wonders, all beings are Buddha, fully endowed with wisdom and virtue," we can then begin to work on turning that reality into our personal experience. We can practice, and we will experience the effects or karma of that cause. When to even a slight degree the 10,000 things step in and confirm the self, the actualities of how we live shift. Thought and insight and action all have their results. In the shift dramatized in this koan, old, sly foxiness at last becomes fully and truly human. What does that look like? How does the koan and its commentary and verse allow us to get clear and show it? Does an enlightened person fall under the law of cause and effect or not? We know that we fall under the law of cause and effect. We lie, and the lie comes back to bite us. We become greedy, eat too much cake, and maybe a bit more than our share because we like it so much, and suffer from an upset stomach. But what about the fully enlightened person? Do things like that happen to them? Maybe we've read that an enlightened person can fall into fire and not be burnt, fall into water, not drown, lose money and not worry. That's for me, we think. Freedom, heyday, heyday, freedom. But what's so wrong about old Pai-Chang's response about the enlightened person being free of cause and effect that it turns him into a fox? And how about the young or current abbot Pai-Chang? He's been given, by cause and effect itself, a chance to refine his old, inadequate understanding from long ago. Not days or weeks or years have gone by, but entire kalpas have passed since that long ago time. Perhaps you remember how a kalpa is described in Buddhist literature. A kalpa is said to be The length of time it would take, if you have a mountain like Mount Everest, and once every 100 years a deva, being from a higher realm, flies down and brushes the top of that mountain with its silken sleeve of its silken robe, how long it would take for that mountain size of Mount Everest to be worn down when that one sweep, once every 100 years, to be worn down to sea level. It's a geologic scale of time. It's immeasurable. So, kalpas have gone by. His once adequate, generally okay view will now no longer do. Can his realization move from mere concept to something personally intimate and genuine? What will he say? He says, the enlightened person does not evade the law of cause and effect. Well, how does this free his past self from its foxiness? The current Pai-Chang, having administered truth's first aid to his ghost of a past self, then heads off to poke out the actual corpse of the old era and cremate a fox body in a funeral service for a priest. Oh, wait a minute. What's that about? Zen Master Koan raises this question quite seriously in commenting on this koan. He says, and this is about 600 or 700 years after Wu Men, perhaps 1,000 years after Pai-Chang, Koan wrote, how can Pai-Chang perform a priest's or monk's funeral service for a dirty, hairy, smelly, dead fox? A priest is clean-shaven and wears neatly pressed robes. A fox is nothing like that. So how can he equate the two? Isn't that a big mistake? Koan adds that this question is actually as important as that of whether the enlightened person falls under the law of cause and effect or not. Why? Why is it as important? What's going on? In the Six Patriarchs Platform Sutra, Wei Nong, the sixth patriarch, in Japanese, sixth patriarch of Zen in China, says to those gathered to hear his teisho that it's only because of causes and conditions planted in the past that they are there hearing his talk now. He tells them that the Dharma gathering, at which they're all together, and at which he's speaking, is the result, indeed is the expression of mutual cause and effect. Who we meet in our life, who becomes our life partner, who we live with, who we practice with, who we work with, who are our parents, who are our children, is the living expression of cause and effect. Our whole life is cause and effect. Eiken Roshi told me that in Japan, karma, or cause and effect, really means mysterious affinities. It can't be explained. If you try and figure it out, who's your husband or wife or partner? Who's your child? Who's your parent? Who do you end up working with? Where does all this come from? Mysterious affinities. So if we think of karma as a bad thing, it seems to be a kind of weirdly populist or popular view, we need to think again. That would certainly be a boorish or limited perspective. In light of this koan and its question of whether an enlightened person falls under the law of cause and effect or not, there's this little eye-opener. Get this. In the Nepalese Buddhist Jataka tradition, there is a little-known text in which the Buddha talks about his 10 sufferings, that is, ailments and difficulties he has as the fully enlightened Buddha. In this unusual text, he humbly traces back the causes of each one of his current ailments, which are things like rheumatism, a sore that won't heal, asthma, perhaps, a period in his life of some weeks when, as the fully enlightened Buddha, he was unable to get any offerings to sustain himself. and had to live on the grain left out for horses as his only food. And he traces each of these things back to specific distant lifetimes. And he names names, and he names places, and he reveals that in such and such a past life, he was a certain very ordinary person, long, long ago, millions of lifetimes. A businessman, let's say, an athlete, a thief, a doctor, a man of the world who, out of a totally deluded sense of self-interest, was rather like the mob boss Tony Soprano. He did terrible deeds, lying, cheating, murdering others to get revenge or get ahead. Though he has matured endlessly since those long, distant, flagrantly self-centered times, he now, as the Buddha, carries the karmic residues and must pay the price, even as the awakened Buddha. But there is a difference, an important one, about freedom in his very ailments. What is that difference? And how might the fox koan clarify it for us? To return to the case, with this koan, drawing on past lives and mythic times and events, Wumen helps us clarify the nature of freedom and see into what karma, or cause and effect, as well as essential or Buddha nature, really mean, whether realized or unrealized, whether fox or human. Our life is cause and effect. Koans and their mondo, that is dialogues, are the music of Zen. Pai-Chang offers a jazzy riff on a fox. Wangbo steps up and, taking a solo, brings it home, accenting the beat, syncopating the rhythm for the sake of the story, while Zen tradition says he slapped his teacher. It simultaneously says he mimed it in reality. You see, Wangpo was a giant, some 7 feet tall, and Pai-Chang was a wizened little old priest. One slap would have sent him flying. Plus, to slap one's teacher would have really destroyed all monastic proprieties. So Zen offers freedom, but tennis with no net is no game at all. So tradition says he mimed slapping. Now the commentary, not falling under the law of cause and effect. Why should this prompt 500 lives as a fox? Not evading the law of cause and effect. Why should this prompt a return to human life? If you have the single eye of realization, you will appreciate how the former head of the monastery enjoyed 500 lives of grace as a fox. Here Wumen fits the entire case into a neat little nutshell. Lives of grace as a fox. Isn't that just marvelous? What a wonderful insight into our own lives just as they are. If you have the single eye of realization, that's the key. But what is that? And what is that grace? Wumen's verse, not falling, not evading, 2 faces of the same die. Not evading, not falling. 1,000 mistakes, 10,000 mistakes. How are not falling and not evading 2 faces of one and the same die? Fox or man or woman, priest or layman, successful, unsuccessful, sick, unsuccessful, sick or well, happy or sad, full of thoughts or beyond thought, enlightened or unenlightened. How are we whole, complete, and free? Not in some imagined future when we're fully enlightened, but right now. Right now, just as we are. Wonder of wonders is what the Buddha exclaimed upon his great awakening. All beings are Buddha, fully endowed with all wisdom and virtue. Only their dualistic sense or habit of self-centered thinking prevents realization of this. Well, That seems clear and simple enough to fix, doesn't it? I'll just stop my self-centered thinking. Why work at practice? Heck, now that I know the secret, I could do that on my deathbed and all will be well. Freedom, here I come. Not so fast. Wumen says that even not evading as well as not falling are themselves the ground of endless mistakes here and now. What is the root of all our errors? Zen aims to help us awake to that freedom right now. In the mix of the complex issues that are our life, your life, and my life, right now, just as they are. Uncovering it, even if it takes us, as it did Pai-Chang, endless kalpas, is worth our every effort. In the Three Pillars of Zen, Yamada Koan, who in time would be the Zen teacher Yamada Koan Roshi, adds in a PS to a letter he wrote to his teacher, Nakagawa Soen Roshi, after a profound initial awakening, that American was asking us whether it is possible for him to attain enlightenment in 1 week of sesshin. Tell him this for me. Don't say days, weeks, years, or even lifetimes. Don't say millions or billions of kalpas. Tell him to vow to attain enlightenment that would take the infinite, the boundless, the incalculable future. That American was Philip Kapleau. Ripening karma, cause and effect, brought him to Japan to be the chief court reporter for the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal, and then it brought him back to practice Zen. If we're not intimate with this breath, this count, this koan, this moment, we are like ghosts. In his commentary on the first koan of Gatelesss Barrier, Zhao Chu's dog, Wumen tells us that ghosts are so ghostly, they must cling to bushes and grasses to have any sense of reality. That is, we cling to bushes and grasses of name, rank, concept, philosophies, opinions, possessions, other people, prejudices, resentments, bank accounts, to make our own wandering ghostliness seem substantial, solid, and real. How shall we find or re-find our authentically human life? If you have the single eye of realization, you will appreciate how the former head of the monastery enjoyed 500 lives of grace as a fox. In his comments on the koan, Aiken Roshi writes, I was living in La Crescenta, California, attending yoga and sensei Zen meetings on weekends. I used to walk up a dirt road into the national forest when I was living there. One day I came upon a fox, or a fox came upon me, with the road bent around a little ridge. She had come trotting down from above, and I appeared from below. We both stopped and looked at each other. At that moment, the wind came up and blew a large piece of newspaper around and around on the road in a miniature cyclone. The fox jumped on this piece of paper and looked at me with a merry look in her eye. Then she stepped off the newspaper and it began to blow around again. She jumped on the paper again and looked at me just as though she were inviting me to laugh at her great game. Suddenly conditions changed and she ran back up the road. That encounter was truly an experience of grace. When you take up Zen study, your task is to personalize that grace in your own body. This is Aiken Roshi. As Yamada Roshi used to say, the function of Zen is the perfection of character. We are not merely solving intellectual riddles. To conclude, all the best to the ghosts we shall meet, the ghost we are, the ghosts through ongoing practice we will not only aid and comfort, but perhaps bring some contentment too, a moment of peace, of knowing to some degree, at last, a bit of rest, and even an openness to seeing that the way of the Buddha is possible, even for them, right now. That change is possible, and that it starts with this breath, this count, this mu or hu, with this very koan, is our way of saying, Happy Halloween.